As the civilian death toll mounts, so does criticism of Israel for what many see as a disproportionate response. Let's now talk about that and Israel's view on the crisis with Paul Hirschon. He's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, joining me there in Tel Aviv. Well, just yesterday, your boss, an Israeli interior minister, called for Gaza to be bombed into the Middle Ages. That's what he said. Well, what does he mean by that?
Well, if we're talking about my boss, the foreign minister, what he said is if we have no choice and we are forced into a ground operation, then the Israeli military needs to go all the way. What he means is very clear. We've set as a goal bringing a sense of calm and normalcy to the civilian population of Israel in southern Israel, who've been subjected to years of missiles incessantly and indiscriminately fired into our residential areas. And what he means is a degradation of the command and control and operational capability of Hamas and some of their cronies, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and such like.
Well, you've just said the words "go all the way." He's mentioned the words Middle Ages. That, in effect, could be interpreted as destroying infrastructure, roads, water supplies. That is surely targeting an entire population. That's against the Geneva Convention and amounts to war crimes, isn't it?
Well, that would be. But that is absolutely not the case as to what is happening, and I think you will agree with me that in over 1,400 military strikes in the last week, with a civilian casualty rate of sadly, a tragic incident of 47 civilian deaths in 1,400 cases, I think you'll agree with me that the Israeli army is operating in a way which is taking every possible step to avoid civilian casualties.
So how do you account for the Save the Children charity? I want to ask you here, Save the Children charity, they are saying families are running out of food and water, 18 hours of power cuts are making matters worse. You are, in effect, targeting an entire population, aren't you?
No, absolutely not. Nothing of the sort. Again, I say to you, 1,400 strikes have resulted in 47 civilian deaths. And I'm not belittling. The last thing I want to do is belittle the death of any civilian on either side of this conflict, or for that matter, any conflict. The problem is that we face here Hamas, who essentially, Hamas, the word Hamas is essentially a synonym for a double war crime. They deliberately target our civilians, while at the same time, with an element of pride, hiding behind their own civilians.
But let me just ask you this. Just recently in the Jerusalem Post, Gilad Sharon, the son of the former Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, he said that the residents of Gaza are not innocent because they elected Hamas. Therefore, he's implying they are legitimate targets, are they not? And that is why civilians are now being killed?
Well, civilians are not being targeted, but
well, they're certainly dying.
Sharon, who you refer to, the Gilad Sharon who you refer to is an individual, and every individual is entitled. We still believe here in Israel in the freedom of speech, unlike, for better or for worse, in the Gaza Strip. And he's entitled to his opinion and say it. He doesn't represent the Israeli government, and it doesn't reflect at all.
Well, he's a fairly influential character, I'd imagine. He's not just, sorry to interrupt, it's not just him saying fairly disturbing or issuing or referring to motives behind this bombing campaign. The Knesset member, Michael Ben-Ari, he called for Israeli soldiers to mow all Palestinians down. Israel Katz, Israel's transport minister, he says the army should be bombing Gaza until the population flees en masse. I mean, these are coming from fairly authoritative figures here, and it's almost as if the true motives are now being displayed.
You can come up with a lot of sometimes silly, sometimes stupid, and sometimes unacceptable comments by people on both sides. We will see consistent comments on the other side far worse than that. But the truth of the matter is you have to judge people by their actions far more than by their words. The Israeli military, the Air Force, the government of Israel have taken tremendous steps to avoid civilian casualties. Tens of thousands of phone calls, tens of thousands of text messages. We've taken over the Palestinian radio broadcast frequencies. We've dropped leaflets on the population, explaining to them what's going on, warning them. We know who the Hamas military leadership is. We know where they are. are.
Okay,
Stay away from them.
You took over the Palestinian broadcast facilities. You, of course, targeted a media centre. Collateral damage was really quite significant with that. One cameraman, we believe, has lost a leg as a result of that. It seems to me that you are blindly attacking targets with little regard for civilians and indeed journalists. Now, do you think public sentiment could turn against Israel as a result of that?
You know, I'm glad you brought up the example of the media center, okay? And you can Google it and you can see the YouTube video clips of the strike on that center. Here's a classic example of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad using the international media, that's you, using the international media as human shields. What we struck today in that media center was an operations center of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You use the word collateral damage, which is a really ugly term, but nonetheless that is the term that many people use. There wasn't any. 4 senior operatives of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad were killed in that strike, and nobody else was injured in that particular strike, where they are using you, the international media, as human shields.
Well, we saw the devastation. We had the film which we showed yesterday, the devastation to our office, our RT office yesterday. It looked as if you were very, very close to actually killing a foreign journalist there. Now that, again, could be classified as a war crime. Isn't Israel taking too many risks?
I beg your pardon?
Aren't you taking just too many risks with this tactic?
No, I don't think so, although I will agree with you that war is a risky business. It's a messy business. It's something that we didn't want to be in. We were dragged into this. I think you can see by the response of the international community, the democratic world first and foremost, which is saying very clearly, Israel has the right to defend itself. So thousands of missiles raining in on our civilians is not something any government could accept.
So what is next now? There are obviously suggestions of a ground invasion, an imminent one. Morsi, the Egyptian president, has said this could lead to serious consequences. Are you concerned that what could happen could ignite a regional war now?
Well, look, I think that the truth is that these are serious consequences, not that anything is going to lead to serious consequences. Thousands of missiles rained in on our civilian population has led to serious consequences. You ask where we're heading right now. We hope that we don't have to take this to the next step, to the step of a ground operation. But it's a very real possibility. If Hamas were to stand up right now and say, okay, they will desist from what they've been doing for some years now, and in particular over the last few weeks, which is lobbing indiscriminately missiles and rockets into our civilian populations, and if they will desist for a very, very long time, then there is no need to pursue this.
Let me just ask you, I mentioned the impact on the region. Of course, Syrian President Assad, his regime is clearly under attack. Now, when his forces attack a populated area, home to terrorists and militants, he's accused of slaughter by the international community. Now, when Israel does it, it's saying it's defending itself. So where's the line there?
I didn't hear the last half sentence, sorry? Where
is the line there where we have Assad...
Oh, okay.
Assad killing people in populated areas, killing his own people, yes. And so what is the difference there? Tell us, where do you draw the line there?
I hear you, and I'll tell you where the line is. I hear you, and I'll tell you where the line is. You see, again, 1,400 strikes by the Israeli military, very carefully targeted. The evidence is clear, and again, every civilian casualty on both sides, every civilian casualty is a tragedy, and we regret it tremendously. But 1,400 strikes with 47 civilian casualties, civilian deaths, means that the Israeli military has been targeting very carefully military installations, command and control, operational capability. The difference is that in Syria, Assad is perpetrating deliberately a genocide on his own people. This is completely different and completely unacceptable. What we are doing is as carefully as possible, avoiding civilian casualties, but we are pursuing, and we will pursue, the Hamas military capabilities and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and a few others until such time as it's clear that they will desist from terrorizing our civilian population for a very, very long time.
Paul Hirschon, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Israeli Interior Ministry spokesperson joining me live there.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be back.
Thank you.